Welcome to another session of Rocket9 Live. Very happy this time to have the guest Joakim Sunden with us, from formerly of Spotify, now of Crisp. He will be in the area in Southern California in June 20th and 21st, to talk about Agile at Scale inspired by Spotify. And we're here with Joakim today to get to know him and get to know what the class is all about. So good day to you.
Good day to you too. It's a pleasure to be here.
Would you mind just first, Joakim, giving us an overview of, or maybe an introduction of who you are and how people could reach out to you?
Sure. My name is in Swedish pronounced Joakim Sunden. Born and raised here in Sweden, where I joined Spotify. It's a Swedish company. Lo and behold, in 2011, when it was still around 10 teams, 10 development teams or squads, as we came to call them. And I spent 6 years there, working with the CTO and managers and some other coaches in the beginning to develop a kind of a new approach to Agile at scale, using concepts such as tribes, squads, chapters, guilds, and so on. That became widely popular all over the world. So
excellent. And I've had the pleasure to hear you speak, to see you speak in person, and you're all over the web. I think it's a very compelling story, hearing about Spotify successes, and particularly the Spotify model has made the rounds through many an Agile conference and discussion. Like I say, it's very compelling. It's a success story, and it has a lot for people to think about. Let me just start off by asking, we're going to talk about scale, Agile at scale here. Do you compare Spotify's model to any kind of an off-the-shelf type of a framework?
No, not at all. I mean, there are some elements to it that I guess is of the more tangible sort, and that's often what people copy when they talk about model. But to us, it was never a model. It's never been referred to as the Spotify model, or not even the model internally. It's just us trying to describe what are we doing, and then describing it again at a different point in time, and then in another version through the animated videos, for instance, and all the time just capturing what we believe is something we wanted to share at the time, and then people have pieced things together and try to copy some of it, or in best case be inspired by what Spotify have done, and take some of the similar concepts and make it their own.
So I love how you framed it there, how you said that it's not a model, first of all, and it was set up so that it worked for Spotify, and it was great in that own environment. But when other people try to mimic it as a model, they might realize that that's not how it's intended to work. So it's great for me anyway to start this discussion with that type of question, because that's something that I get often is, oh, could you just plop it down as you may, like a safe or a less or something like that. Not that you would want to kind of just install a framework anyway, but I think it's really important to hear that right off the bat. I know that you guys have talked many times, and mostly about autonomy and autonomous squads. Can you tell us what a squad is right off the bat here?
Yeah, sure. A squad is what we call development teams or delivery teams. There are squads. Spotify actually often refer to it as the autonomous squad. And the CTO we quoted earlier saying that he wanted the squad to be the center of the Spotify design, so to speak, that all other organizational features would be designed to support this mini startup like team. So the intention would be that they not only are they autonomous in the traditional agile way, which I would say is mostly about self-organizing and how should we be doing things, but also a great amount of autonomy in actually coming up with what should we be doing. So within the boundaries or constraints of a mission, the product owner, who is a member of a squad, would together with the squad figure out what do we need to do to further our mission or to reach our metrics. And other than that, it's a very typical agile team, 5 to 9 people, cross-functional, co-located, clear mission, but also in the DevOps sense, it owns its own operation, eats its own dog food. So also on support or on call. So if something breaks in the middle of the night, you're getting the call to fix it.
So before I go into the scaling aspect of this, just wanted to poke a little bit more at the squad. You had mentioned that they're their own mini startup. You had said something about a mission. And can you tell us about the process? Do the teams all have to use the same process, or are they autonomous in the aspect that they can choose to use a Scrum or Kanban or a mishmash or something else?
They are very much free to use whatever process fits the team, and there are constraints, of course. Many of them are implicit into the organization's culture, in the sense that if you're saying that, oh, we're going to take a sequential waterfall-ish approach to this and analyze and then design a solution and so on, that wouldn't match with every expectation in the organization, that we want you to constantly be delivering things, showing progress and metrics. So agile is kind of assumed in that sense. There are some other essential things, like we expect all squads to have a stand-up, a recurring retrospective. Spotify would also expect you to have some kind of backlog or roadmap. There are other things like you should do code reviews, you need to use GitHub, you need to use Jira for bugs. But beyond those constraints, if you want to go with Scrum or ScrumBun or Kanban or some other homegrown method, just knock yourself out.
So I could ask so many questions about the engineering culture there. It sounds amazing. But let's ask what we expect to. How's this 2-day session looking? How's it laid out, and what are people expecting to hear if they attend?
So it started out as an idea that I had even before leaving Spotify, that we were pretty good at conceptualizing and documenting some of the things that we were doing, but I think we could be even better at writing that down and understanding and sharing within the organization. But we never seemed to find the time. So when I joined Crisp, and with my then colleague Jimmy Janlen, who was already a member of Crisp, who used to consult for Spotify, so we were colleagues at Spotify in a sense. He had the same idea, so we set out to construct this training, of course, around Agile at Scale inspired by Spotify. So it's really just using a lot of the materials of the approaches and the things that we've been developing and others have been developing at Spotify, but also thinking through that a little bit more. Why was this successful? What was really going on here? Why did we apply this kind of approach? What were the results? How did it evolve? What did we try that wasn't so successful and retire? So overall, this resulted in a course that's more about an approach to finding your path to becoming agile at scale. So you could say that's, in a sense, the real Spotify model: continuous experimentation, adaptation, and being really adamant about thinking through, if you're doing something, if you're trying a tool, or if you're coming up with a solution or an experiment, what are we hoping to get out of this? And then constantly follow up. Are we doing it? Are we doing it? Are we getting what we wanted? If not, tweak it, consider another solution. And I think that's something that Spotify has been doing really, really well. When I now consult with companies and sometimes at Spotify I felt like, oh my God, we're just reinventing the wheel. Why don't we go ahead and just call it a department instead of a tribe? And why do we need to really think about, oh, what is the chapter lead role over and over and over again? But really, I found that doing that made us really understand and value and optimize and do trade-offs. So when I come into a company these days, they want my help to solve some management structure or organizational design. I often ask, so what is the role of management here? And they're like, oh my God, we never even thought about that. What is it? And oh wow, I'm here whole week. Great, thanks. So yeah, having reflected really on all of these things and continuously experimenting, I think that's what it's really about. And we give lots of examples of what we've been doing, and so people often also come away with several useful concepts that they will copy straight off the bat, but hopefully also a different way of thinking and approaching agile skill.
Yeah, so it sounds like this course is really how to experiment and improve. I think I read something that, again, as I asked in the first question, I kind of teed it up. Can you just drop the quote Spotify model in? And of course not. Really, there are some generalizations that you can generalize some of the principles, perhaps, when you take these concepts to another company. But in terms of the specifics, that's where you really have to get into the experimentation. So are the attendees then working through any problems, maybe in table groups or individually, where they can do mini experiments in this class?
Yeah, well, they're not really doing the experiments in the class, but hopefully coming up with some to run back home. So we've constructed the courses starts with what we believe is the fundamental piece for really being successful at being agile at scale, which is succeeding at being agile with one squad. So how do you build a great team? What does an autonomous squad mean? How do we use squad health checks and different team kickoffs and minimum viable agility and things like that to really support and help the squads become awesome? And then we focus on what does the supporting structure look like? What are the roles that are working immediately around the squad and to support it? What is the role of a chapter lead at Spotify? How does that work? What are some problems we've seen? How have we mitigated some of the risks? What are the benefits? Why did we design it that way? And what have we learned so far? Agile coach, product owner, and other roles. And then how do these roles actually work together behind the scenes as a supporting team that's really helping and challenging and coaching the squad? So after each of these sections, there's typically an exercise where you will, for instance, design what would my squad health check model look like, a self-assessment for the team to guide them towards what is the vision for what an awesome team would look like at my company. And in other instances, it would be around leadership. What ideas does this inspire for you to bring home to your company and try or experiment with? There are also some experiential exercises, and of course, it wouldn't be an agile course without a Lego exercise. So we got one of those as well. Don't worry.
Oh, we gotta love our Legos. Have to have those in there. Who would a typical attendee be? And you've done these a few times now. So who are you seeing that really comes as an audience member, participant? They get engaged and a light bulb goes off. And who do you see the typical attendees being, perhaps, and maybe who would you like to see more of?
Well, it's a good question. If you would have asked me who I thought would attend it the first time we ran it and the next couple of times, it's very different from what I've actually seen. I thought maybe we would attract agile coaches and maybe the occasional manager and so on, and mostly from bigger companies, maybe startups that are growing, or maybe bigger companies that want to transform into something more agile. But what we've seen is we've probably run this course now 20-25 times, and we've done it in Stockholm many times, of course, that's where we're based, but also in Hong Kong, in Cape Town, in London, in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We're doing it in Milan this Wednesday and Thursday, Los Angeles, of course, in June, and very different audiences. I've done it in-house or on-site with companies. I've had like the 40 top managers for SAP's innovation department or division, really. It's been global banks. It's been government agencies in Norway. Yeah, it's a very wide variety of people who attended, and from these, it's also a lot of different roles, like VP level people, managers, a lot of middle managers, and agile coaches, but pretty inexperienced coaches, or even like advanced Scrum Masters, to people who are certified safe trainers, certified less practitioners who've done transformation work and senior agile coaching for 10 or 20 years, but people from companies who are just 3 teams to companies of hundreds of teams, and they all seem to be getting a lot of value out of it. The most common feedback around what could improve is probably when we run an in-house course, but that's true for every course I run. There's like, if we're at a bank, I wish there were more banking examples. If we're at a government agency, I wish there were more government examples, and of course valid feedback for them, but not very actionable when it's a course inspired by Spotify. But
yeah, I think that's a trainer's dilemma, is to always find the right balance of generalizing the topic enough so that everyone gets some benefit, but yet providing not too many specifics so that you don't alienate too much of a room. I know that when I teach topics, I'll get feedback to that extent sometimes as well. But when you have such a mix as you're describing there, in such of a kind of a workshop setting, how do those in-class exercises then work with you, with a mix of different levels of people and companies and even industries? Do you see them just kind of naturally coming to these in-class exercises, or does it take a little bit of kind of wading in the water before they dive in?
No, I think people have been really actively participating. We typically run small groups all the time, so it makes it easier to quickly get up to speed and or get to know each other and be comfortable in talking in these small groups, I think. And we've rarely had any sort of negative or constructive feedback around the exercises. So from that point of view, they seem to be working well. And often when we debrief, people have lots of good ideas to share, and I love it because I learn new things all the time when debriefing these exercises. So all the ideas that people are bringing home.
That's exciting. So just a couple more questions here. First of all, you mentioned some other phrases. You mentioned the squad health check, minimum viable agility. I think I'd heard you talk about OKRs in the past. You cover all of these topics in the 2 days?
Yeah, actually, where I stopped talking about topics, that was basically not even the first day was done. We go on and to talk about okay, once you've nailed it with squads, or now you know how to build a great squad and the supporting roles around it. We go on to putting all teams together in a tribe. What's the reason for a tribe? How is it different from a department? A hint is that a big part of it is around creating a sense of team in a team of teams, and all the mechanisms that we are using to build a shared identity and experience for the tribe. Then typically the second day we start off with tribe leadership, So how does leadership support and work with the tribe, from the product, technology, and design tribe leads to chapter leads and product owners and agile coaches and other formal leadership roles, and how they work together in leadership teams and so on. And then how do we align this? I mentioned I joined Spotify when we were 10 teams or squads. At the time I left, 6 years later, we were 200 squads. We went from 60 people to 2,000 in engineering. So it's quite a growth. And understanding how Spotify has shaped their agile at scale is also understanding hyper growth and how that has driven some of the decisions we made at Spotify. So we go into how do we align all these hundreds of squads, and then we come into Spotify Rhythm, which is a framework that Spotify developed itself with company bets, North Star goals, and two-year missions, and so on. And we also use objectives and key results. We've been using it since 2009. Retired it for a couple of years, trying something else, but then came back to it really. So we'll talk a lot about that as well. And then information sharing, onboarding, some cultural aspects and values. We actually put the values at the end because by the time we get there, we have already shown in practice that Spotify really lives these values. So we're more summarizing and tying it back in because that's basically how we tell the story. We also talk about the product development framework called let's see, think it, build it, ship it, tweak it, and a couple of great innovation stories that really shows the power of autonomous squads. How the CEO thought that something was a really bad idea, didn't want to do it. They didn't get any more funding. People said that no, you shouldn't. That's a bad UX experience. That's bad architecture. Still, it was possible for them to make their own choice, to run a low-cost experiment to see, does this really fly? And that became one of the most loved features of Spotify. So yeah, there are lots of I think they're great stories like that all out.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. I'm going to be there for the 2 days. I just want to hear these stories. Even if most of the stories are coming from Spotify and less from the other attendees or maybe other institutions where you've worked, it doesn't matter to me wherever the stories come from, because we're going to hear some great stuff organizationally, engineering, culture and practices, agile principles. So much is going to be there. And I could keep going on, Joakim, and asking you more questions, but the last question I'm going to ask you then is, you could tell I'm excited about it. What's maybe the most exciting thing, or the thing that you're feeling best about this class, and maybe it's the same question, but what would you like to pass on to people who are listening and still not quite sure? What's the real excitement that you think people should get excited about? What's the message you think people should be jumping out of their chairs and saying, yes, I want to be there?
Wow, that's a hard question. But what gets me excited about this particular instance of the course is that I feel the course is getting better and better every time we run it. Not just because we're constantly continuously improving, but comparing it to when we did it for the first time, I was fairly fresh out of Spotify. Jimmy was still in there consulting. And since then, this almost 2 years now, we've been working with organizations who have been inspired by Spotify, who have been working with tribes and squads and chapters, who have taken this to their context and adapted it. And we've seen much more firsthand, and through the course also met people with their challenges and problems and learned how have they applied these things. So now we have an even better way of describing how the different things work. So when we come into a tribe, what are the do's and don'ts? What have we seen in practice actually work for other organizations who wants to apply some of these things? So it's not just telling the story about Spotify and how we did things, but also throughout the entire course, we have these integrated bits about how can it actually be used in other organizations, and what are some things others have tried.
So the class Agile at Scale, inspired by Spotify, is coming to the Los Angeles area June 20th and 21st of this year, 2019. For more information on the class, you can go to the Rocket9 Solutions website. That's at rocket9solutions.com, and you can find more information there. Joakim, do you have any contact information you'd like to share with our listeners? How they can reach out?
Absolutely. So you can reach me on Twitter. I'm not super active at the moment, but I'm there. It's Joakim Sunden. So you probably have to put that in writing somewhere, but it's Joakim Sunden, one word. And you can also reach me on my Gmail, which is my first name dot last name without funny characters at gmail.com. So I'd be happy to take all your questions.
Joakim, thank you so much for taking the time today to tell us about this exciting course that's coming up, and happy to talk with you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you there. And then,
thank you. It was great fun.
And for those of you listening, I just wanted to say this is Vic Bonacci, having a great time with not only this and other webinars. You can find out more on our website, rocket9solutions.com. Rocket9 Live. Engage, learning.